So here we are. We've got Phil Hill has got the car really tuned out great for Spa, and puts it on the front row with Mike Parks and Phil and I believe Pedro on the sides. So we got Ferraris on either side, the Daytona Covers on the front at Spa, and the flag falls and Phil just disappears. And then all of a sudden the announcer gets very, very excited. And of course it's all in Belgium and everybody's going on whatever, because it's all about Phil Hill is winning and leading and whatever and running away from the Ferraris. And then there's a lot of excitement going on, and what he's explaining is that the car is not running. And then here come the cars, and all the Ferraris go by, and finally the Daytona comes sputtering in, and Phil is shouting out there. He says, "We're out of oil, out of fuel pressure. There's nothing in there." And then by then the fuel pressure has gone back up again, and so they put him back out on the track immediately, and he takes off. He gets down about 200 yards, and it runs out of fuel pressure again. So he's got to go all the way around the track, comes back in. We pull the back end off the car and check the fuel pumps, and they've been clogged up with some material which in Belgium they call cotton waste. It's what they use as rags to sop up oil. So the car had been sabotaged. All this stuff had been put in the fuel tanks overnight. You know, we never expected anything like that, but racing's a little bit different in Europe. It's war over there. So they sabotaged the car, and they cleaned out the pumps. Phil went out, again broke the lap record a couple more times, but there's no way he was going to win. So we didn't win at Spa, although we had definitely the fastest car. So then the second car is now finished down in Modena, and it's trucked up to Le Mans. And John Olson has put crew chief on that car. This is CSX 2299. This is the second car, the first car built in Italy. Because John Olson had built this car, he was totally familiar with it. We put him in charge of building that car up and getting it ready for Le Mans. It had never turned a wheel in anger. I mean, we took it over to the airport behind Le Mans, ran it up and down the course a few times, make sure there was nothing leaking, and ran it around the track a couple of times, make sure it was okay, and started the 24-hour race. So as the race gets going, now we've got a very interesting set of guys. We've got Joachim Neerposch, and New Zealand driver driving this car, and we've got Dan Gurney and Bob Bondurant in the brand new car. So this car is leading. It's actually faster. They've made some changes on the car in Italy on the roofline, which I'll explain. It's a little bit slower down the chute than this car because of the aerodynamic changes. But what happens is, in preparing that car, getting it ready for the race, they put all brand new parts on it. So the fan belt had been brand new. Late into the day, the fan belt had stretched out. When they turned on the lights, it ran the battery down and it wasn't charging enough. So when he came into the pits and went to restart it, click, 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 it wouldn't restart. The pit marshal kept saying in French and broken English to it, "The car must start under its own power." And our guys are going, well, of course, you know, and we're going to try to put a set of jumpers on a battery, and he's saying, you can't do that. Keeps coming back saying, the car must start under its own power. Now, he's not allowed to tell us exactly what to do because that would be beyond the rules.
Right.
But he's trying to infer that if you start the car here and let it build up charge and then shut it off and then restart it under its own power, that would have been legal. Our guys didn't understand that. Finally, they just, in frustration, they put a battery on upside down. They go out and the car's immediately disqualified. So now there's a big argument between Wire and Carroll, arguing with the FIA officials, saying, you know, and they said, if that car is not brought in immediately, we'll disqualify both cars.
Wow.
So this car was brought in, the first car was brought in and parked. So our lead car is taken out of the race on a technicality. At that point, Bondurant and Gurney swept into the lead with the Italian-built car and led the race. So now the car is doing so well, by the end of the race, it looks like we can win Le Mans overall ahead of all of the prototypes. But we get a rock through the oil cooler, and Dan notices it because the car is beginning to get squirrely. You know, it's getting oil back over on the tires. He comes back in, we're losing oil pressure on the gauge. He explains what's happening. They lift the hood. The thing is bathed in oil on the inside, and they discover that there's a little pinhole and it's blowing oil out all over everything.
Right.
So they immediately said, okay, let's put some more oil in it. The pit marshal comes over and says, can't put any oil in it. You have to run so many laps before you put oil in the car. And they're going crazy. You know, they pull the dipstick out and there's only about that much oil left in the bottom of the thing.
And you were able to actually locate where the pinhole was, right?
Yeah, yeah, you could see it blowing out,
okay.
Right. So they said, okay, go out and run real slow, and while you go out and do that, we will make a bypass on there so that when you come in, we'll take the oil cooler off, and that'll make the number of laps we can put some oil back in it, and we can proceed. So they had to run really slow because there's so little oil in the pan that you accelerate it, pulls the oil away from the pickup,
right,
or braking or cornering. So they're driving around like an old lady just to make sure the car gets around. So when the car finally gets back in, they pull the dipstick out, it's empty. There is no oil in the bottom of the pan. But they put the hose on there, bypass it. Now it's legal to put oil back in. Now the limitation is, without the oil cooler, the car is running hot.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of running by the tachometer, they're running by the oil temperature gauge, and that's telling them how fast they can go. So they babied the car all the way around, and of course we won the GT cars. So first time out again at Le Mans, Dan Gurney and Bob Bondurant win Le Mans.
Right.
We could have been 1-2, and if we hadn't lost the oil cooler, we would have won overall.
Right. Where would the car, in that case, would it struggle in the long straightaways because it wouldn't have a chance to stay cool, or where did
that was the problem?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
which is where it was designed to be going fastest anyway.
Le Mans is a type of track where you're on the throttle all the time, and it's a really, really hard-on engine, so you have to breathe it a lot to keep it cool. Mm-hmm. So we had to run less RPM just to keep it cool enough. Otherwise, we would have blown the engine. And we probably ran that last lap with probably no oil in it at all. I mean, so the fact that that engine stayed together was really
amazing.
A testament to how good that Ford engine was.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, of course, we were ecstatic because we won the GT class. And again, getting the points back up put us back up even with Ferrari. So it's looking like we've got a chance to win the World Championship in our first year out. So the next couple of races, the cars, we have to run at Goodwood and the Tourist Trophy. It did very, very well, and I mean, we get around to the back end of the last race. It was at Monza. Now, by then, we had already had some more chassis built. So, almost to put a stick in Enzo's eyes, Carroll decided that we were going to build a prototype one of these. So the chassis had been lengthened 3 inches, and we were designing to put the big 390 cubic inch aluminum engine, which is a same block that we were running with NASCAR, the FE iron block. They made in aluminum, 390 cubic inches.
This is up from the 289 that you guys had in there?
No, this is the FE block, the 427 block, but they made it in aluminum.
Got it.
It's only 390 because it's not a full 427. So that car was built up with a long chassis and everything, but the rest of the parts didn't get there in time, so we never got to run the car. And then the other surprise was that Ferrari knew that because we had 2 more cars built when we showed up at Monza, he was pretty much going to lose at Monza. Now, there's no way that Ferrari can lose at Monza.
Right.
I mean, that would have been...
It's heresy.
Absolutely. The Italian public would have killed him. So he went to the Auto Club d'Italia and got them to cancel the FIA points race for that event. So at that point, without being able to get any points on the FIA, he ended up winning the race because we couldn't compete against him in the last race. So under politics, he ended up winning in 1964 and really took the win away from us. So in 1965, now Ford management has realized that really it's the Shelby team that's allowing Ford Motor Company to win. The GT40s are not winning yet. So the program was taken away from John Wyer in England and was given to Carroll Shelby. And at that point, the whole Cobra program was shut off. If it had not been for Ray Geddes, who was our champion within the Ford Motor Company, that would have been the end of the Daytonas. But Ray realizes that the cars were capable of winning it. So he arranged that we would, quote, lend the cars to Alan Mann in England, and Alan would run the cars over there, and he ended up winning the World Championship for us in 1965. Mm-hmm. Shelby American gets credit for winning the World Championship in 1965 because the identification plate on the car says it's built by Shelby American. So Shelby gets the points on it, but it was actually the Alan Mann team that won the championship.
Right.
So the cars ended up winning. And the interesting coda to that whole story is that when the cars were returned to Alan Mann, they were just sitting over in a corner. They're just old race cars. There's a knock on the door, and it's the tax man. He comes in to Alan, he says, these cars were brought into England under bond, and they've got to be out of here. And if they're not out of here, we've got to, give you a huge penalty. Mm-hmm. So, of course, they wire over to Shelby, who's now totally involved with Fords. There's no Cobras at all going on at Shelby's anymore, and said, we've got these cars sitting here, and they're going to have to, pay a lot of money or a big penalty fine because they brought under bond and they haven't got them out. Nobody pays any attention to them at all. So these telexes are going back and forth frantically all one way. So finally the tax man comes back and said, if the cars are not out of here, we're coming in with all our trucks. We're going to pick them up. We're going to put them on a barge, take them out in the North Sea and dump them in the ocean. And we're going to charge you for that. And this is what it's going to cost. So Ford says, okay, well, fine, send them back. It's the cheapest way out. So that's the only thing that saved it. It was cheaper to send the cars back to the United States and dump them in the ocean. So the cars were sent back to the United States.
Right.
And of course they were sold off at fire sale prices.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
Just absolutely crazy.